Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. The webinar will now begin. Just a few technology tips before we get started. All attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. Every once in a while, just be sure to tap your screen so that it doesn't go to sleep during the presentation. And there will be time for questions and answers at the end of today's presentation. You can text chat your questions in at any point during the presentation by clicking on the red arrow in the upper right hand of your screen and typing into the chat box there, and the questions will come to us, and again, we will ask them of the presenters at the end of today's presentation. And finally, a recording of today's presentation will be available on farmcrediteast.com/webinars for playback at a later time. If you have any trouble accessing this recording, you can contact myself, Christy Schmidt, at 1-800-562-2235. And now I'll pass it over to Bob Smith to get started.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Farm Credit East Knowledge Exchange Program, we'd like to welcome you to this webinar on OSHA inspections on dairy farms. We think you're going to find this extremely informative. We are pleased that we have co-sponsors for this webinar, along with Farm Credit East. This is being sponsored by the Northeast Dairy Producers Association, NEPA, by New York Farm Bureau, by Cornell Pro Dairy, and by NICAMP, the New York Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health. We're excited to bring you this webinar. I think it's our third or fourth webinar on OSHA and on the OSHA inspection process on dairy farms in New York. It also has implications beyond New York, but certainly New York State. As you can see on your screen now, the objective is really to update you on inspections that took place on dairy farms in New York in 2014 as part of OSHA's Local Emphasis Program, and to talk about the findings of those inspections to help prepare dairy farm businesses for potential inspections in 2015. We really have two speakers today, and I'm going to go to the first one in just a second, but Ron Williams from OSHA is going to cover the findings so far, the inspection process to date, and what OSHA has seen. And then we're going to have Carl Zimick from Cornell Extension talk a little bit about the resources available to producers in getting ready, if you will, in assessing your operations for potential inspections and obviously to keep them safe. We will hold questions till both presenters, till after Ron and Carl make their presentations. We think that would be better, but throughout the presentations, please text chat your questions in. You type them in, we will have those, and then we will present those to the speakers at the end of the presentations. With that, it's my pleasure. I think this is the third time we've had him back for our webinar to introduce Ronald Williams as our presenter from OSHA. Ron Williams is a Compliance Assistant Specialist for the Syracuse Area OSHA Office. Before becoming the Compliance Specialist, he was Assistant Area Director in the Syracuse office, overseeing safety and health inspections for over 15 years. He is active in his community. He's a firefighter in his volunteer fire department. During his high school years, Ron worked on dairy farms, so he has a working knowledge of dairy farms out there. He did field operations, tractor work, etc. So he has some feel for the challenges and work on our dairy farms. With that, I'm going to turn this over. Ron, we greatly appreciate your willingness to be involved and to provide this information and to share your insights. So, Ron?
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, everyone. There again, today we're going to talk about the OSHA Dairy Farm Initiative. There again, we're going on year 2. Today, our objectives, we're going to discuss the Local Emphasis Program for the dairy farm operations here in New York State. We're going to talk about the inspections that federal OSHA has conducted on dairy farms here in New York State. We're also going to talk about hazards that were identified by the New York State 21D OnSite Consultation Service. There again, just a little bit of review about the OSHA process and how we get out to your dairy farms. We have programmed and unprogrammed inspections. So what are we talking about? We're talking about unprogrammed inspections where we're active in nature. So we're coming out to your facility because you had a fatality. There again, if you have a fatality at your dairy farm, you have to report it to us within 8 hours. If you have a catastrophe where 3 or more of your employees are admitted to the hospital from a dairy farm accident, you have to report it to OSHA within 8 hours. And also new this year, as of January 1st of 2015, if you have a non-fatal accident where you've had an amputation, one of your employees are actually admitted to the hospital, inpatient hospitalization, or if one of your employees has a loss of an eye, you have to contact OSHA within 24 hours. And other unprogrammed activities where we're reacting to an accident, where if we had a referral from a state agency or a police agency, or if one of your employees made a formal complaint with us. These are ways we'd be coming out to your farm. But there again, in any of those cases coming out to your farm, if we come out to your farm to do an inspection, 2 things we're going to ask, because we're out there because of one of these unprogrammed events. We're going to ask if you're going to be exempt from an OSHA inspection if you ask you and you employ only 10 or fewer employees currently or at any one time in the last 12 months. Or we're also going to ask you if you had 10 or fewer employees, did you have an active temporary labor camp during the last 12 months? So those are 2 important items we're going to ask. If you had 10 or fewer employees and you did not have an active temporary labor camp, then even if you've had a fatality or catastrophe or were there for employee complaint, we're not going to do an inspection at your farm. And as it states there, family members of farm employers are not counted when determining the number of employees. And then a part-time employee is counted as 1 employee. So with the definitions on family members, as it listed here on the slide, we're talking about immediate family members means those in direct relation to the farm employer, such as parent, spouse, or child. And then specific to the question, if we're asking if you have a temporary labor camp, 2 questions we're going to ask. Number 1, employees employed for a set period of time. So you've brought those employees on to assist you with harvesting a crop, to assist with a temporary period, to assist with haying or birthing of the calves. And then the second, we're going to ask you to determine if you have a temporary labor camp. Number 2, employers require the employees to live in employer-provided housing. So you have to meet items 1 and 2 to meet the key definition of a temporary labor camp. Now, if we're doing a program inspection, and that's specific to our presentation today, where our dairy farm operations local emphasis program. So if we're coming to do a programmed inspection at your dairy farm, where we've selected your dairy farm to do an inspection, we're coming out to your establishment, we're sitting down with the top management official at that farm, and we're here because we're here to do a local emphasis program inspection. And there again, this is also, this directive for the local emphasis program went into effect as of October 1st, 2014. Now, this has been the local emphasis program for dairy farm operations, or initially went into effect as of October 1st, 2013, and we've extended it a second year. So now we're into our second year. So if we're coming out to do inspection under the local emphasis program, only one question we're going to ask, and that's if the employer has had 10 or fewer employees currently or at any one time during the last 12 months. So we're not going to ask if you have a temporary labor camp. We're just asking how many employees you've had at any one time in the last 12 months. And again, we do not count family members. So we have to show that you've had 11 or more employees at any one time in the last 12 months for OSHA to come on to your dairy farm to do an inspection. If you haven't had more than 10 employees at any one time in the last 12 months, we do not have jurisdiction. We will not do an inspection. And there again, with this Dairy Farms Operations Local Emphasis Program, it covers three OSHA office jurisdictions. So on the left-hand side, the Buffalo area office jurisdiction, the center of New York State, which is under the Syracuse area office jurisdiction, and then the east side of the state, the Albany area office jurisdiction. Those three area office jurisdictions is where the local emphasis program incorporates dairy farms. Now to date, so we've inspected dairy farms. There again, as I stated before, the original local emphasis program went into effect October 1st, 2013. We agreed to not start doing any dairy farm inspections until July 1st of 2014. So as it shows here on the slide, we started doing inspections after July 1st of 2014. As of today, we have completed 8 inspections. We attempted 11, but 3 of those farms that we went out to do inspections, 3 of those farms had less than 11 employees. So we had no jurisdiction. We had to leave those farms. We did not conduct inspections at those farms. So to date, we've done 8 inspections in the Albany, Buffalo, and Syracuse area office jurisdictions. There again, New York State Department of Labor 21D on-site consultation program, they have done 25 visits conducted statewide. So federal OSHA has done 8 inspections. New York State on-site consultation has done 25 visits out to farms to assist farms. As far as gathering, if you want to look at some data and statistics and see what farms that we in fact have inspected, if you go to our website, and there again, you visit our website, and on the right-hand side of the slide, you see www.osha.gov. So you go to our website. There again, you see the circle on the slide where I circled data and statistics. You click onto that, and under data and statistics, it's going to bring down a drop-down box. And listed there, I circled again with the box, you can search by an establishment. There again, if you know the company's name, you can search by the name of that farm. You can search by industry. There again, the dairy farm operations. You know their NAICS code, which is North American Industrial Classification System. Or you can also cite by frequently cited OSHA standards. So standards that OSHA has cited for dairy farm operations. So let's just go to that. So here's showing the example. If you click on the establishment, so there again, if you type in, if you know the name of a farm, you think they've been inspected by OSHA, or if your farm's been inspected by OSHA, you can type in the establishment name and then submit that, and that'll bring up any inspections that were conducted of that establishment, that farm. Or, as I stated before, if you want to click on and search by industry and you want to find out what standards have been cited, what establishments have been cited by OSHA under dairy farm operations, and there again, the North American Industry Classification System, that second box, you see I have 11212. So if you type 11212, you can gather that data on any establishments, any farms that have been inspected anywhere in the United States. So in this particular case, I had entered New York, so you could do it just by New York State, and you can find out any farms in New York State that have been inspected by federal OSHA. So let's take a look, and what I want to go through now is hazards that were identified by federal OSHA and also by New York State on-site consultation service. There again, dairy, cattle, and milk production, the North American Industry Classification System code for them is 11212. So my previous webinars that I did with you all, if you happen to see those, we identified the top 12 hazards identified in dairy farm operations. We call it the Dairy Dozen. Now here I have the listing of the 12 hazards identified at dairy farms, the ones that were identified during inspections by federal OSHA in New York State and by New York State OnSite Consultation Service are highlighted in red. And let's go through and talk about these. So the first one is hazard communication. There again, as listed on the right-hand side, we do have an agricultural standard for hazard communication, which is 1928.21A5. And there again, that references a general industry standard, which is 1910-1200. So going on to the farms, this is what we found. We found dairy farms that had not developed a hazard communication program. We found dairy farms that did not have safety data sheets for the chemicals being used on the farms. We did find chemicals that were not labeled. And the big thing with labeling is what we ask for on all your chemicals that are being used on a job site. And let me give you an example of something as simple as a gas can. We're looking for you to tell us what it is and what the hazard is. So if I'm talking about just a portable container of gasoline, we want to see the word gas on the container, and then we want you to tell us what the hazard is. So you can put the word flammable on the gas can, or you could put a pictogram on there, which is a picture of a flame. But you have to label all your containers on your dairy farm. And another item we found with the hazard communication, we found that employees were not being trained. So an example of that would be where your hoof dip, milking powder, and your cleaning chemicals for using formaldehyde, copper sulfate, acids, okay, your cleaning place operation for using various chemicals. You need to ensure that all those containers are labeled. You need to make sure that you have the safety data sheets for those chemicals that are being used on the farm, and employees have to be trained when using these chemicals. And a good example of that, in the slide that I show you here, we have a 55-gallon container of Ox Black, which is a cleaner. And notice you see in the middle there, it's a corrosive, and I just circled that for you. And this is what we found, another hazard on dairy farms, where we found dairy farms using corrosive chemicals and no eye wash station was readily available. So something like this is not an acceptable eye wash station. If you go right to your safety data sheet for your corrosives that are being used, and you take a look at that, and under where it says what to do in case of emergency for first aid, it's going to say that you need an eye wash station, and it needs to flow water for 15 minutes. So one of these stations shown here on the slide would be an approved eye wash station, something that would flow water to flush out the eyes for 15 minutes. Next, on the dairy farms, we found a lot of employees using different chemicals, exposing themselves to different hazards, and not wearing personal protective equipment to protect them from those hazards. In the middle of the slide there, we recommend that you follow and take a look at 1910-132 and do a hazard assessment. Walk through your dairy farm, take a look at what hazards employees are being exposed to, and give them the appropriate personal protective equipment to protect them from those hazards. Here, another hazard that was observed during the walkthrough and inspections of dairy farms here in New York State. We had a lot of issues with guarding of floor and wall openings. There again, walking working surfaces, anytime if we have a fall more than 4 feet, we need some means of fall protection. Any floor openings need to be covered. There again, a lot of tripping hazards shown here on this slide. Another example here that was observed on dairy farms here in New York State, where you have an office area or a lunchroom, and then above that space you have a nice mezzanine. And there again, its storage is always at a limited, there's always a shortage of storage space, so they take these mezzanine levels and they put storage up there. Well, if you're going to have the employees go up there to retrieve product or stock or material from this level, then you have to guard that level. Okay, so What we're looking for is a walking working surface. We have a fall greater than 4 feet. We need fall protection. So shown here, this is railings and mid rails were constructed out of 2x4s. There again, your top rail is at 42 inches plus or minus 3, and then your mid rail is half that, approximately 21 inches. Another item here was fixed industrial stairs. There again, anytime we have the stairs with 4 or more risers, we need a handrail, something to hang on to, steady that employee while they're walking up and down those stairs. Or here, use of portable ladders. There again, we had situations, we had employees that are climbing up portable ladders, standing on the top step or the first step down. There again, you need access to a specific level, get a ladder that's long enough. You cannot stand on the top step or the first step down on a portable ladder. And there again, make sure you use these ladders in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Here, manure storage and processing. There again, just like we had on the walking working surfaces, we need to safeguard employees from being able to enter into these storage and processing areas. We need to put up the guardrails to safeguard employees to keep these out of these spaces. And just like that picture on the top left, there's a little opening in that corner. There again, that needs to be enclosed. You need to put chains across there or put railings across there. Keep employees and be able to enter into these manure storage and processing areas. Also, if outside storage, make sure we got the fencing around it, or if we have access where we need to dump into that lagoon or storage space, make sure we got some means of stopping or a gate, or we have a push-off ramp. Or here, as far as entry concerns, so like the bottom right, we have access. You're going to flip up that access lid. Now, if employees got to work in that space, we need some means, either railings or the employee being tied off, so they're not going into that, entering that space. There again, we highly recommend that you would follow, if you need to enter in any of these spaces, or these confined spaces, recommend that you follow the General Industry Standard 1910-146. So we make sure that you identify all your permit recorded confined spaces in your workplace. Make sure we prohibit unauthorized entry. Develop a written program. Establish procedures if you need to enter into these spaces. Electrical. A lot of electrical items, a lot of electrical hazards were observed during our walk-around inspections of the dairy farms. There again, I call this low-hanging fruit. We have a lot of electrical exposed energized parts. We had a lot of the knockouts missing on junction boxes, electrical boxes, a lot of damage from animals. Shown here, damaged lead cords, cords going through doorways. Top right there, we have receptacles, no cover plates, portable tools at the bottom left, damaged cords. The bottom center, extension cords with broken off ground print, frayed wires, or on the bottom right, we get a lot of dust, debris, and covers missing on boxes. We're here, the electrical panel. So here again, we're showing you on the left side there, we've got electrical panel. The directory is all whited out, so we cannot tell what controls what. We have breakers. There's some breakers that are marked spare, but they're in the on position. There again, if they're in the on position, they should be not marked spare. Tell us what they control. Over on the right-hand side, where we got circuit breakers that are missing, or blank covers that are missing. So now if the employee reaches in there to flip a circuit breaker on or off, their hand could slip off and make contact with the energized bus bar. Also, where you're utilizing ground fault interrupters to protect your employees, make sure you tested the ground fault interrupters. There again, this is a tool. This is a tool that can go bad. So a recommendation that you plug a tool into it, hit the test button to see if the tool in fact turns off. Make sure they are operational and maintained. Skid steer loaders. There again, we had skid steer loaders out there where we had operational lights that were not working. The interlocks where you have to sit down on a seat to operate the piece of equipment were bypassed. So make sure these items are up to par, they're maintained. There again, you want to follow your manufacturer's requirements on these pieces of equipment and train your employees how to use these units. Silos. We did see some silos out there where we had lack of fall protection. There again, shown here on these photographs, on this slide, we have cages around the ladders, a means of fall protection, or use of a ladder safety device. Any ladder that's over 20 feet in straight length has to have some means of fall protection, either a cage or a ladder safety device to safeguard that employee. Storage of flammables. There again, observed during our walk around. This is specifically, we see this out in the shop. We're repairing of tools and equipment on the dairy farm. There again, if we have acetylene oxygen, it's being stored and needs to be separated by 20 feet or a half an hour fire separation. They cannot be stored together. Also, if we're using and dispensing of flammable liquids, so if you're dispensing, like shown here on the right-hand side, if you're dispensing out of a 55-gallon drum, you want to do bonding and grounding. So bonding and grounding and with wire and alligator clips to bond those two 55-gallon drum and a portable container together. And there again, as I stated before, with the hazardous communication program, with the issues that we had is labeling. Make sure we label all these containers to what they are and what the hazard is. Exit routes. We went into some storage areas during our walk-around inspection, and we saw some exit doors that were blocked. There again, all exit routes have to be maintained. And especially this time of year, we've got a lot of snow, and I'm looking out my window right now and I see a lot of snow going on. So you want to make sure before all employees access to their work area, making sure that all the exterior doors, all that snow has been removed, and that employee has safe access to get away from that building, that barn. Because this is the type of things that we're finding, where we got storage of material blocking that path to that exit door to get out of that barn or getting out of that storage building or that shed. And then if you do have fire extinguishers, make sure that they are maintained and make sure we have access to those fire extinguishers to be able to use those in case of emergency. Portable grinders. We found some of this in some of the work areas. There again, the work areas, we had a lot of benchtop grinders. And the typical thing that we're finding, like shown on the left-hand side there, we have a work rest. There again, that work rest should be maintained so it's within an 1/8 inch of that wheel. And as shown on the right-hand side, a tongue guard, that has to be within a 1/4 inch of the wheel. And then also shown below in the center picture, we're missing the cover on the end chests. Another one here is our tractors. There again, I think we just had a couple instances of this that we observed during our walk-arounds here in New York State. There again, we do have the Pacific Agricultural Standard, which is 1928.51B1, roller protected structures, making sure we have a ROP structure on our tractors that are being used on the dairy farms. And making sure we have the ROP structures that are being maintained and make sure the employees are in fact wearing the seat belts and make sure those seat belts are being used and employees are trained on how to put on the seat belt. And there again, if we did have an accident where a tractor was going to roll over, their employees is hooked up, wearing a seat belt, and they're just going to be upside down. Okay, so they're made safe. And also shown here is when using tractors, and there again on the right-hand side, we're showing Pacific Agricultural Standards. So the 1928-51B1 is for the ROPS. 1928-51B2 is for ensuring we have the seat belts. And we also have 1928-51D, which is the operator instructions. And we talk about all employees must be trained to operate those tractors and the hazards associated with operating those tractors, and that has to be done initially when they're hired on and at least annually thereafter. Another thing that we found is employees working on equipment and not shutting it down. Okay, there again, we do have a specific agricultural standard, which is 1928.57 A6II, hazardous energy control by performing servicing and maintenance on equipment. So there again, some guidance documents. You want to take a look at your manufacturer's manual for the specific equipment, piece of equipment that you're working on, and follow those. Okay, and take a look and consider using it in developing a lockout tagout program. Next was record keeping. There again, if you are an employer that has 11 or more employees, you must maintain records of any occupational injuries and illnesses that occur on that dairy farm. And there again, these forms can be downloaded off our website. So if you are an employer of 11 or more employees, you must maintain records of any occupational injuries and illnesses that occur on the dairy farm. There again, this is showing you the OSHA 300 form. As I stated before, this form can be downloaded from our website. There again, anytime you have a recordable injury, an illness, where you have a death, days away from work, job restrictions, lost time, or medical treatment, it must be recorded on this form within 7 days of that incident occurring. Also, you fill out this form throughout the calendar year, and then at the end of the year, you're going to add up your totals on the OSHA 300 form, and then during the month of January, you'll add up all your totals from that previous year. And this is your summary of all the work-related injuries and illnesses. So you'll complete this form from all your totals from the OSHA 300 log, certify that. There again, a management official or the highest ranking official on the farm would certify that all these numbers are true and correct. And then this summary form must be posted for 3 months. So we give you the month of January to add up all your totals, and then you're going to post a summary from February 1st to October 30th of the year following the year covered by the summary. Also, as far as posting, again, so you're going to be posting at OSHA 300A, the annual summary. Also, you're required to have a job safety and health poster. And there again, I did give you a website address so you can download all posters, not only OSHA job safety and health posters, but fair labor, minimum wage, many posters that are required by different agencies. You can all download these posters. They're all free of charge. Next, and we observed this again during our walk-around inspections on the dairy farms here in New York State, we had issues with guarding of the power takeoffs. And there again, that's a typo there. That should be at 1928.57. That is a Pacific Agricultural Standard, where we had shafts that were not properly guarded. And there again, we're talking like shown here on the bottom right, we had our master shield, the driveline shield, and an implement shield. So all the PTO shafts are required to be guarded. And also guarding of other power transmission and functional components. There again, any exposed pulleys, belts, gears, chains, shifts, sprockets, and projections on shafts, keys, or set screws shall be guarded on all the farm and farmstead equipment. So what are we talking about? We're talking about augers, conveyors. We're talking about barn scrapers, ventilation fans. And a good example of that is that on the right-hand side, the lower right-hand side, where you got, there again, just a motor, okay, and you got a belt and pulley, okay? And our concern there is that ingoing nip point on that belt and pulley. That all has to be guarded. And then here's some of our farm equipment are, again, our augers, our scrapers, our sweep arm mechanisms. And some more examples here. There again, at the top left, our belt and pulley. On the right-hand side, a chain and sprocket. Bottom left, we have any of our industrial fans. There again, our concern there is any of these fans that are below 7 feet in elevation. So if they're up high, no exposure to employees, it's not an issue. Also here, if you're going to be using aerial lifts, we did see a couple of these out on some farms. There again, they're using this to complete some maintenance work or other functions on the farm. But if you are going to use an aerial lift, there again, aerial lifts, articulating extendable lift, there again, you can tip this platform, the employee can fall out of this aerial lift. They have to be wearing a belt and they have to be attached to the lift. And then if you're in situations like this where you need to climb out of that, then you better have a harness with a double lanyard. So we have one that's tied off to the basket and the second one where you're going to tie off to and undo the first one from the basket. But once you get on one of these lifts, before you go up in the air, you want to be clipped off that basket because you can tip that basket and flip yourself out of that basket. Okay, another one here that was observed were the powered industrial trucks. Again, this is machinery, mobile equipment. There again, like anything else, piece of equipment that can go bad, things that will break down. There again, we had situations on dairy farms. We had lights that were not operational. We had equipment that horns were not operational, seat belts that were missing. Some had backup alarms that were not operational. So making sure we test this equipment, make sure all the controls and all safety equipment is operational on these pieces of equipment. And then if you're going to add anything to it, like shown on this slide, we have this boom extension that's attached to one of the forks. Anything additions that you're going to add on to this fork truck, or even if you're going to add fork extensions, then you must get the manufacturer's approval for this modification. So again, all our farm equipment, making sure that all employees are trained to operate all the farm equipment. When operating our piece of equipment, our tractors, our skid steers, make sure we have ROPS equipment on them, make sure employees are wearing their seat belts. Anytime we're hooking up to any of our implements, making sure the PTO shafts are guarded, and any other housings or even the engine housing itself where we have exposure to belts and pulleys or the fan blades, make sure they are covered. Also too, in our milking room, as far as potential for multiple hazards in a milking room, be it the slippery floor, be it any electrical hazards, tripping hazards, making sure the chemicals we're using, as we stated before, making sure the chemicals are labeled and employees are trained on hazards associated with those chemicals and make sure they're wearing the right personal protective equipment to protect them from that, making sure we have adequate lighting in our milk room, making sure employees are made aware and trained on the potential for being kicked by the cows, and making sure we're aware of and using our compressed air properly. Also out in our shop, and a lot of these, I call it the low-hanging fruit, a lot of hazards were observed out in the machine shops or shed, where we're doing all the welding, the cutting, the grinding in our electrical and storage. And again, too, that first one, the elevated and block machinery. There again, if we're going to be working on a piece of equipment, making sure we have the adequate jack and jack stands are in place to work on a piece of equipment and make sure we're shutting the equipment down before we work on it. So here, and Carl will speak about this more in his presentation, but I just want to give you and I make you aware in this presentation I do have a listing of New York State Department of Labor 21D on-site consultation service. They're again coming out of Syracuse, Buffalo, and Albany to come on to your farms to assist you and do consultation, and Carl will speak more about that in the next presentation. Again, as I stated before, if you do have questions and you want to just contact Federal OSHA, there again, our Buffalo, Syracuse area office duty officers are on staff Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. More than happy to answer your questions, concerns that you have, and tell you what is required by the OSHA standards. Or you can give me a call. There again, 315-451-0808 extension, or you can shoot me an email. And more than happy to respond back to you in black and white and tell you specific what the OSHA standards say and are required.
Ron, thank you very much. That's very informative, a lot of information there, a lot to consider. Some very good slides as far as showing the specific situations that you found. Again, I'd like to encourage the participants today to please text chat your questions in. We have a couple of them, but we're going to hold those until the next presentation. We're real pleased to be joined by Carl Zimick today. Many of you know Carl. I'm not going to go through a long introduction, but Carl is a senior associate with the Cornell Pro Dairy program. He's got a lot of great information on environmental issues and now relating to OSHA as well. Love the way that Carl kind of combines the practical understanding of the challenges on farms with kind of legal, regulatory, compliance-related obligations that we have. So with that, we're going to have Carl provide some information on the resources available to producers as you consider your operations, and then we'll open up questions for both Carl and Ron. So Carl, take it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Well, good morning, everybody. And I just have a few slides here to follow up on Ron's presentation as folks are thinking about how they may want to refine their safety program based on the information that Ron provided. There's a few additional resources that are available. Certainly, NICAM is going to be your main source for obtaining additional information or refining your program, again, based on the information that Ron provided. If you see some areas of your farm where you may need to circle back and brush things up, the NICAM folks, and I'm leaving that slide up on the screen for a few moments so that people can get the website or the phone number. NICAM's going to be a major place to go to get some assistance for reevaluating or refining your on-farm health and safety programs. And I also want to emphasize that NICAM is obviously not just for OSHA compliance, that farms with 10 or fewer employees would be also smart to be working with NICAM to reduce risks to the employees and family members' safety and health. And I can't overemphasize that aspect of things. So NICAM can do farm safety walks. They can provide first aid training. They have bilingual staff who can communicate with some of your Hispanic workers, if that's the case on your farm. They can help you with hazardous communications. That was first and foremost in Ron's presentation a few moments ago. A number of issues regarding hazardous communications. And again, NICAM can help develop and refine and retrain and keep your staff trained in that area. They can do tractor and skid steer safety training, animal handling training, and of course NICAM provides a supply of the rollover protection structures and PTO covers for farms at a subsidized rate. Ron also mentioned what he called the 21D program, or the New York State Department of Labor's on-site consultation program. He mentioned that there were a number of farms that have worked with the New York Department of Labor on-site program staff to get their farms evaluated. I see this as a second step to, once you've evaluated your farm, worked with NICAM, and if you want to check your work, a great way to do that is to reach out to the OnSite Consultation program. With the number of farms that we've had that have gone through it around the state, I think there's opportunity to do more. I know that the Department of Labor staff are willing and able and interested in spending time with more dairy farms on this issue. And so if you're at a place where you've got some of your systems in place, an additional outside viewpoint of your operation to identify any additional areas that need to be worked on. And that's, again, the website up top and the link to it. So they visited 25 farms, and a couple of those farms had 2 sites, so there are a total of 25 visits with the on-site consultation program. I want to remind people this is not an enforcement visit. They tour the farm site for safety hazards. They'll look at your records. They'll make suggestions on how to address any hazards they've identified. There's one caveat: you need to make sure you're going to be willing to address and correct serious hazards that if they identify any. So a farm that invites them in is going to want to be prepared to do that. And then lastly, the DOL on-site folks can also provide air testing and noise testing in the case where there's situations where the farmer or the consultant is unsure of air issues or noise level issues, and if additional equipment or protections are required. The on-site program or New York Department of Labor also provides even a next step beyond called the SHARP program. Those are for small businesses that want to take the next step and to really nail down and drill in on their health and safety programs. I know of at least one dairy that has entered into an effort to become SHARP certified, and there are various advantages to that program as well. Of course, lastly, there are other resources that can help farms in achieving some of their employee training requirements and goals, and certainly veterinarians are part of that group. There's various consultants out there that are helping farms work through a number of issues. I know farms that have worked with their implement dealers to come in and do very equipment-specific trainings. Local fire departments are another resource as well. So those are just a few slides that I put together to try to circle back around and help remind people about where they might reach out for additional information to improve the health and safety issues on their farms.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent resource overview. Really appreciate that very much. We will now go to some questions. We've had a couple of people ask about the presentation. The presentation will be available, the PowerPoint, along with the recording of the webinar. And we'll show that address later on, but it is farmcreditease.com/webinars. And so you can either click on to see the recording of the webinar, or you can click on either of the PowerPoints will be available on that page as well. And that should be up tomorrow, possibly later today, but certainly by tomorrow morning we will have that up and available for anybody that would like to either do the webinar or look at specific PowerPoints there. We'll go to some questions now, and again I would encourage folks to text chat any questions you have in. I think probably most of these go to Ron, but after Ron answers, Carl, if you have anything, please feel free to suggest any additional points. First question, Ron, do you need a toe kick where you have rails of greater than?
Hello?
Yes, Ron. Go ahead. Did you hear the question?
Okay, so the question was a toe where you have guardrails because you have potential fall. Okay, if you're going to store equipment up on, say, for example, on a photograph I showed you, a slide photograph I showed you of a mezzanine level, and if you're up on that mezzanine level and you're going to store material on there that could be knocked off and strike somebody down below, you need a tow board. When I'm talking about nothing fancy, just a 2x4 up on end to prevent that box or that wrench from going off that open side floor and striking somebody down below.
Okay. Second question, Ron. If a dairy is in construction mode, is the dairy producer, the owner, responsible for contractors' compliance to OSHA regulations while construction is being done?
Okay, so we're looking at an employer-employee relationship. So if the dairy farm hires an outside contractor to come in and do work, and that outside contractor is directing all his employees and he controls the operation, then we're just looking at the outside contractor. As compared to if the dairy farm owner just brings in manpower to do a specific task, like to build a structure, and he or she directs the work, then we're looking at that farmer to ensure and provide safe conditions for those employees that are doing that work.
Okay. If the individual asking that question wants to follow up, please text chat it in the end. So if it's a contractor coming in, they're directing the work, that is not the responsibility of the dairy farmer per se. If the dairy farmer or producer is bringing people in and directing the work to be done, then it is the responsibility of the dairy producer.
Correct. That is correct.
Right. Ron, question came in. Can you summarize, I guess, the most common problems found on the 8 farms and have all those, the reference here is to 8 farms, and have those farms all heard back from OSHA?
Okay, the most, as I call it, the low-hanging fruit, the biggest items we found were electrical issues. And those are very easy, like in the slides I showed you, very easy to see. So doing a walk-around inspection of the dairy farm, you can easily see the electrical issues. And then as far as has all the issues with the dairy farms been resolved, they have not. Because there again, our statute of limitations, once we do an inspection, we have to issue any citations against that specific farm within 6 months. That is our statute of limitations. So some of those inspections, citations have not been issued yet. But there again, you can take a look, as I stated before, you can go to our website and you can do an industry search based on for dairy farms at NATE's code, and you can see it'll show you what inspections are open, but it may not show that anything has been issued against those farms.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Since the dairy local emphasis program was renewed for 2015, what is the plan for inspecting dairies in 2015? When might that start? Have you started inspecting any dairy farms this year?
Yes, we have. There again, the local emphasis program was revised again for this year, which started our fiscal year, which starts October 1st, 2014, and runs through September 30th, 2015. And we have started inspecting dairy farms.
Okay. Next question, Ron. Horizontal bunker silos were not part of your list. Where does OSHA plan to go with regards to this area?
There again, we are inspecting dairy farms, and if we observe any hazards associated with the horizontal bunkers, we are addressing them.
Next question, Ron. Are maintenance procedures and confined space entry procedures required record keeping?
Therein, we highly recommend that the employers develop a specific procedure for making entry into any confined spaces. Okay, they're going to need to develop a procedure, so a lot of companies will follow our general industry standard, which talks about developing a permit and following that permit procedure, and then maintaining records anytime they do an entry. And those are great for using for a training tool.
Ron, I got a couple more here. You had bunker silos as part of the dairy dozen. What are some of the hazards seen in this area?
There again, as I addressed, we have not cited any hazards on horizontal bunkers, and that's because they have not been observed during the walk-around inspections. But if we do see employees up on the horizontal bunkers, standing at the edge, we're going to address that hazard of employees being exposed to a fall. But there again, so our concern is employees who are covering up the silage on the horizontal bunkers, uncovering, placing the tires, or doing facing and standing right next to the exposed to a potential avalanche from the silage. Make a recommendation also out there that if you go to YouTube, University of Wisconsin has developed a nice training video on hazards associated with horizontal bunkers and how to safeguard employees. And that's been out there for, I think, less than a month.
Yeah, we might try to find that and include it with the information on our webinar recording page.
I will get you that reference, a link to that, and I'll email it to you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. The next question, what are the required annual trainings?
The required annual training is for the operation of the tractors. That's a required annual training. Also, training with the hazard communication program. So if they're introducing any new chemicals, they need to complete training on that before employees use those new chemicals.
Okay. Next question, Ron. You do not mention ventilation requirements for areas other than chemical use, welding silos, uprights, and manure storage. Are there guidelines for these or ventilation other than those that you mentioned?
So there again, when you have a hazard, the priority as far as to eliminate that hazard is you want to engineer it out, you want to do administrative controls, which could be job rotation, and then your last way to safeguard employees is through personal protective equipment.
You know, Ron, I read that question wrong, and I apologize to the folks emailing it in. It really said you do not mention ventilation requirements for areas of either chemical use, welding silos, upright, manure storage. Are there guidelines for these?
There are guidelines. What you want to utilize is there again, if we have issues with ventilations, we have to show employees are being overexposed above our permissible exposure limits for that specific chemical. There again, if you're talking about something as simple as dust, then it's a situation, is it bad enough where I can't even see my hand in front of me? But if I'm talking any chemicals, any toxins, then I have to show that employees are being overexposed above our permissible exposure limits for that specific chemical.
Again, I would encourage folks to please text chat your questions in. Next question, Ron. What is the procedure for correcting a hazard, and if corrected, will the farm avoid a fine?
Once we conduct an inspection on a farm, the inspector sits down with the farmer and reviews all the alleged hazards that were observed. At that time, during that closing conference with the farmer, they'll agree on an abatement period to correct those conditions. So if they're corrected during the walk-around inspection, that's great, they corrected it. or they need 5 days, 10 days, 30 days to correct that condition. But that will not prevent the potential for a fine for that.
Next question, Ron. Would you please mention the OSHA requirements related to workers using respiratory protection?
So there again, we do not have a Pacific Agricultural Standard 1928 standard for respiratory protection on farms. If we're going to cite issues with respiratory protection, so if employees are wearing respiratory protection, we'd have to cite a 5A1, so we're referencing the General Duty Act of the OSHA Act, General Duty Clause of the OSHA Act, and then we're going to reference an anti-standard for respiratory protection.
Thank you. I think that wraps up the questions. I'm going to give Ron you a last chance to kind of comment on anything else that you'd like to remind folks about, and then Carl, I'll do the same to you. I do want to read one message that came in that I thought was also potentially helpful. It relates to the New York Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health. NICAMP is also great at providing review training. If a farm owner manager has specific needs or wants to reemphasize on certain program areas, the NICAMP staff has been flexible and works well with farms to accommodate their specific needs. You just need to have that conversation with them. We appreciate that comment coming in. I think NICAMP is a great resource, and we would emphasize that that's someplace that you can reach out to and look for information. With that, a final wrap-up note, Ron, anything else that folks ought to be thinking about?
Again, also with that last question, so as a recommendation as far as a best practice, with respiratory protection, farmers want to take a look at our General Industry Standard, which is 1910.134. Specific to the presentation, there again, most of these items were, I call them low-hanging fruit. These are things that were easily observed during the walk-around inspection. There again, the problem I see out there is most employers will walk by hazards and never recognize that there's an issue until they have an accident or serious injury with one of their employees. So I highly recommend, like shown in Carl's presentation, utilize your insurance carrier, utilize New York State OnSite Consultation, utilize NICAN, get another set of eyes out there to assist you to point out these hazards and get these hazards corrected.
Thank you, Ron. We really greatly appreciate your participation today and your ongoing commitment to the educational process here. Let me turn over to Carl now. Carl, final comments?
Sure, thanks. I do want to say that we need to continue to press forward and look for ways on individual farms to improve bunker silo safety areas. NEDPA, New York Farm Bureau, and Pro Dairy folks have continued to dialogue with OSHA state and regional director on a number of topics, and the bunker silo one is still one that is that is a concern to OSHA, and we do need to keep looking for ways to make operations around bunker silos more safe. We've met around the state. Kurt Gooch and I from Pro Dairy have met with a number of farms in small group meetings around the state last fall and early this winter, and heard a lot of things that individuals are doing to, again, make those operations more safe. And we're putting together a document, and we'll share that around shortly. So just wanted to remind folks that even though the bunker silo safety was not an issue highlighted in red or part of specifically a part of Ron's presentation, that doesn't mean that it's not an issue anymore.
Thank you, Carl. That's a great point to make. One other comment came in relative to the New York Center for Agriculture, Medicine, and Health. NICAMP also assists with any health conditions that may limit an employee or farm owner in their job duties, making recommendations and providing adaptive equipment. So that's also another place where the New York Center for Agricultural Medicine and Health can be of assistance. Excellent presentations. Greatly appreciate Ron Williams from OSHA, Carl Zimick from Cornell Pro Dairy in helping us provide this educational opportunity to producers. The recording, as I noted before, will be available along with the PowerPoints and any other information that we have, including the link that Ron mentioned at farmcrediteast.com/webinars. If anyone has a suggestion for a future webinar, please let us know. You can email Chris Lawton at chris.lawton@farmcrediteast.com at any time and make a suggestion. We would love to have them. So on behalf of Farm Credit East and our Knowledge Exchange Program and our co-sponsors, NEDPA, New York Farm Bureau, Cornell Pro Dairy, and NICAMP, we greatly appreciate everybody's participation. We hope today was informative and insightful and helps you as you manage your operations. With that, I would thank you and have a great day. So long. And Ron and Carl, thank you very much. Bye-bye.